I suppose the most basic definition of digital identity is everything by us and about us online. But when we talk as educators about digital identity, it's more about intentionality and agency around our own digital identity. So what kinds of conversations do you want to be a part of, and where are those spaces happening? And in those networks, how do you create an identity in order to take part in those conversations? So again, using something like Twitter for an example, there's an immediate decision that a person would make about whether or not they want to try and use that tool, and then there's a further decision about how they want to be using that tool. Do they want to integrate their personal and professional identities? They want to have a separate professional identity, and those are all individual decisions that we all make on our own. But I think it's important to try and be part of the conversations that are happening in networked publics. Because if we don't have a voice in those spaces, then we're not heard, and we're not part of creating the future, basically. I have been, I suppose, a very active social media user for about the past 6 or 7 years. Certainly I've been on Twitter since 2009 and been blogging since about that time as well. And I started using social media myself, I'd say just as a learning and networking tool, because a few colleagues told me that there were educators using tools like Twitter and so on, and very quickly found that I was able to build a network, and which continues to be my personal learning network, and it has grown and evolved over time as I've developed and grown over that time. Generally, yes, because like you say, learning is an identity project. So students come in and their identity is very much changing, and their identities are forming during the time that they're in, say, higher education, which is where I work. But what I have found, working with undergraduate students for many years around these kinds of areas is, students tend to come in with very well-developed social identities online, but not very confident online identities as learners, as scholars, as soon-to-be professionals, or sometimes even as citizens. So that's the work that we do together. And I think that's important that educators in higher education support and help students develop those identities while they're within education, because we are teaching them in our respective faculties about being nurses or software engineers or philosophers or whatever it might be, but from the moment students leave us, they will be doing those things and also being citizens in public spaces, which include network publics. So they will be making decisions about who to be online and how to be online. So that needs to be part of the process of higher education, really. The research that I'm doing at the moment, one of the things I was speaking about in my session this morning was, yes, there is pressure, is the word used, about having an online identity and content production and so on, but it is an individual decision about how and where we choose to do that. And I think that's really important for staff and students, that we may be encouraging staff and students to have identities, but every individual comes up with their own balance between privacy and openness. And we can tell lots of stories about the value of openness. It's very important, it enables us to be part of conversations and so on. But privacy, to what extent someone wants to be private is a very personal decision. And it has to do with, who we are as individuals, maybe our family situation, our if we have a partner or not, or even in a class where we're inviting students to be open, there are dynamics within that class that if we invite students to be open, we're going to be entering into that. So we have to be cognizant of all of that and allow and encourage people, to create and develop their digital identities, but only to the extent that that they feel comfortable. And usually what happens is, that just is an emergent phenomenon. It's not like, okay, I'll use Twitter, now I am on Twitter. Mm-hmm. How you use it evolves with time. That's part of these very important conversations that we need to have with one another and with our students. When we use tools, like a Twitter or Facebook or whatever, who owns that data that we share there? What's happening to it? How does that, how are those data traces connected? To what extent do we own our data? Can we make other choices about platforms that we use where we have more control over our own data and our online presence? Those are all really, really important. Understanding, things like online surveillance, online shaming that happens. I mean, if we ignore those really difficult conversations at our peril, we should precisely be talking about what's happening. And if things are happening, in the news this week now, let's bring it into the classroom, online, physical, whatever the classroom is, and discuss those and what they mean for us, as again, as citizens, as students and academics, but more importantly as people and as citizens, because we all have to make important decisions about that. At the end of the day, I think we have responsibilities as scholars to be present in network publics. To model that for our students, and not to model it as experts, but people who are just learning and developing our own understanding all the time around those things.